Hello everyone and welcome to episode 4 of Baker's Chatcast. Today we are joined by Goldie Lookin Chain star John Rutledge, also known as Eggsy, and he talks to us about his career in music, his influences, and also his podcasts he's got. Thank you and I hope you enjoy. Right, so John, how are you and how has lockdown been for you so far?
Good. Lockdown has been rubbish.
Yeah.
As it has for everybody else in the country, but still going strong, waiting to get the vaccine, and doing all right, doing all right, as well as anyone can be at the moment, so yeah.
Yeah, we've just got to get through it really, and hopefully by the end of the year things will be back to normal.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, we haven't done any gigs with the band for, it's coming up to a year on February 22nd, so we're looking forward to getting back out and doing some shows. I know all the stuff we had lined up for last year was pushed back, and it keeps getting pushed back. The only thing that I can see happening at the moment potentially is we've got a festival in November, a thing called Shine On, which is we played it a couple of times before, and it's brilliant. Is it called Shine On or Shine? And it's a big weekender that happens in a Butlins, and they get loads of really good bands, and then us as well. And we go in, and that'll be fun. So fingers crossed, at least that's something to look forward to.
It's quite hard for musicians in this situation because last November, December time, say you rescheduled a tour for around May this year, you would have thought it was bound to go ahead, but we're getting there now, and stuff's still getting pushed back and back, so it must be really tricky for you musicians with postponing stuff.
I think it's anyone who does. I think anyone who's sort of self-employed, really. It's just suddenly the rug gets pulled out from under your feet, and you've got to sort of try and adapt to it. So I've been sort of trying by making some bits of comedy and stuff at home and putting them online, and just doing my best to stop myself from going insane.
That's exactly what I thought when I started this. But first of all, I'd like to ask you about your band, Goldie Lookin Chain.
Yeah.
How did it all start out for you in music? What made you want to get into making music, and how did it all start for you, basically?
I always wanted to make comedy.
Yeah.
And, I've always been into sort of, even when I was a kid, I had like a really crap tape recorder that would just record stupid stuff into, and, just making stupid stuff up with my mates. And we sort of made a string of bands, although none of us could play an instrument. We'd always come up with band names, but not actually being a band.
Yeah.
And this went on for years. Nothing happened. Really got into music, really got into comedy, and just sort of dicking about as you do. And then through sort of skateboarding and hanging out, I met Reese, who produces all the stuff, P. Zane from the band. We were about 1992, 1993, and we ended up meeting each other through skateboarding. By pure coincidence, found out a few weeks later we were doing the same course. We did a BTEC media course in media. That's why it was called a media course.
Yeah.
And we were doing stuff there and just hanging out, and all the time we're just listening to music and sort of not really thinking, oh, we're going to do this. This is going to be amazing, But we just carried on doing what we were doing, and along with all the other boys in the band, a lot of us were mates from school and college and stuff like that. And then Reese started DJing. He picked up a bit of kit and started making some beats. And every time he made a beat, I'd be sitting in the room and would say something stupid over the top, and this went on, and he was like, "Shut up! You're ruining it. This was a good beat until you ruined it." And then one day he got a really cheap microphone. And I was like, "Well, let's just record some of this stupid stuff over the top." So we did, and we just sat there laughing at it, and we thought, this is ridiculous, because suddenly in that space of time, in the late 90s, all the technology started to become more accessible, So we did that, and then a few of the other boys got involved, and we started getting drunk on a Friday. Instead of going to the pub, we'd get drunk just in his bedroom, and we started saying, "Go on, say something stupid over the top," and we did. And we kept doing that, and then suddenly we had like a few tracks, so we put them onto tape, and we'd listen to them and laugh at them. And then the tapes started spreading to other people, and then we started burning them onto CDs, and it suddenly just got a bit of a following, and we were all of a sudden just in a band without wanting to be in a band, you know.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, no one knew who we were, but they knew the band, but they were like, who are these people? What is this? So that went on for a while, and then we thought we'd do a gig, and the gig was insane. It was in a place called the Welsh Club in Cardiff, which has been around since, I think, the 80s, and it's a really good independent music venue. And it sold out. It completely sold out, you know. People were sort of, somebody paid 100 quid for a ticket, which is unheard of when you're a band that isn't a band and you've never done a gig before.
That must have felt amazing.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it.
Also a bit strange at the same time with obviously just starting out, so...
Yeah, and that's it. And it was all just a real whirlwind, and then we got management involved. People started asking if we wanted management. We were like, well, if someone wants to manage us, then maybe there might be something in this. And then we got offered a record deal, and that just kept snowballing and snowballing until it reached a point where it was like, well, yeah, this is good. Let's give it a go. And we got signed to Atlantic Records, and we ended up, you know, touring the world, and, you know, songs did really well, and we sold like 100,000 copies or whatever of the first album that got called Greatest Hits, which to us was, because that was a compilation of the 7 albums we'd made. They were the most popular tracks off those 7 albums we made beforehand, which were just CDRs and just tapes, and they were the songs that people liked the most off of it. So we thought, well, what a great name to call our first album anyway. And in a way, they were our greatest hits because they were the songs that got us recognised before anyone at a record label even knew who we were. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Because I was going to ask you about how you met the rest of the lads, but you've just answered it for me. But another thing, you go by the nickname of Eggsy in the band. How did you just come up with all these nicknames and all that? Was it like an overnight thing when you were drunk, or?
A mixture of it all, yeah. I mean, like hip hop, we always I always loved hip hop, and you know, as we all do, you know, and we realised we couldn't do hip hop. There, you know, if you try to do it seriously, quite often people try and start a band and they try and emulate the music they love, but they end up overdoing it, and it's really bad, and it's like a second-rate version. But we knew we could make a second-rate version of it, which was funny. And we were like, if you're going to be in a hip-hop group, you need to have a hip-hop name.
Yeah.
So we gave ourselves some of the worst possible names. And mine came out of... I mean, I can't go into too much depth because it's quite disgusting, but it pretty much comes down to a Belgian drug dealer whose name was Jean Benoit. And obviously my name's John. And there's a type of device that can be used to pleasure the female organs known as Benoit balls. So we just, aka love eggs. So we just messed around with that for a bit, chucked that in, and everyone just thought, let's just give ourselves stupid names, you know?
Yeah.
You know, again, if we tried to be serious with it, it just would have been laughable for all the wrong reasons. But fortunately, people laughed for the right reasons, which is good.
Obviously, you originate from Newport in Wales, don't you? And
Yes.
I was wondering, what was it like actually growing up there? Like, were you influenced by a lot of the Welsh music? Obviously, you had some great bands like the Stereophonics. Obviously, a bit of a different band, but in Wales, it seems to be like all of like a close-knit community, and all the Welsh acts support each other and stuff like that. Like, obviously, you gave me 5 tracks. We'll come on to that in a minute. But how were you influenced by like Welsh music and music in general?
I think sort of growing up in Newport, it's always had a really good music scene.
Yeah.
It used to be a club there called TJ's, which closed about nearly 10 years ago now, and that was the sort of independent music venue. You know, because besides that, you had really horrible nightclubs like Ritzy's and all those really cheesy nightclubs that were just places to go and get drunk and fight. But TJ's, you could go and get drunk and see really good bands. You know, we had people like Nirvana coming over before they were massive. Oasis played it before they were massive. You know, bands like Green Day played it. It was just a place where all the bands on the way up would play. And there used to be loads of those venues around the country that sadly don't exist anymore. But it was a really, really great place to see and hear music. And on top of that, I was never a massive... I love loads and loads of different bands, loads of music, but there wasn't a lot of dance music. There wasn't a lot of hip hop going on, and that frustrated me a bit because Newport had a lot of old punks and had a lot of indie kids, but it didn't really have much dance music going on. So that it was great. There was somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And the DJs on a Friday and Saturday, they always do that bit where they play for like half an hour in the middle of their set. They play all the drum and bass that was happening at the moment, and they play all the rave stuff, and then they switch over back to the Brit pop stuff and things like that. So it was a really good melting pot of music and stuff. But I was never taken that back with the whole British indie guitar scene. I do like a lot of the bands from it, but it wasn't my main thing. It was great to have that stuff there though in Newport, where you could go out and hear different music, which was cool, So yeah, it was good. And then later on, when we started to get a bit of recognition as a band, I mean, I use the word band loosely, but Super Furry Animals were who I think are just a brilliant. Their whole back catalogue is fantastic. They heard about us. We heard rumours they'd been listening to us on their tour bus, and they asked us to support them, and that was another step towards us getting recognition, which was fantastic, because they were a band that were mixing up sort of the sounds of garage rock and indie and rock in general with dance music and all that.
Yeah.
They were a real melting pot band. So to be able to do a show with them was like, wow, this is good. I like these guys, and I'm getting to do a show with them. So I can never thank them enough for that. They're a brilliant bunch of guys, so lovely.
And linking to music influences, I asked you for the 5 songs earlier that sort of like shaped your career, and we'll start off, obviously, one of the greatest musicians to ever exist on the planet, David Bowie, Space Oddity. What does that song mean to you when you talk about...
Well, I think one of the things I like about hip-hop is it's really good storytelling music. I think a lot of music ends up just being a love song, and that's it. So many songs are just about love, and that's it, I like hip-hop because it really paints a picture, and quite often, I mean, some of it's just ridiculous, but it paints a little picture in your mind, and there aren't many songs outside of the genre that do that. But David Bowie, who I'm not a massive fan of by any means, I know the hits, but I remember hearing that song when I was a kid, and it's just so weird. It's a song about a spaceman, and he's in space, and I remember hearing it on the radio and being, this is really, really strange. And I was like, that's cool. And, I remember I didn't particularly like pop music when I was growing up because I had 2 sisters, and I always associated pop music with, at the time, New Romantics and disco and all that sort of stuff, which I just thought was for girls. But when I heard that, I was like, well, this is really strange. There's a man who looks a bit weird singing a song about going into space. So there's that made me sort of realise that there is a place for a different narrative in pop music, and that was really interesting. I didn't go on to follow him really heavily and become a mega fan or anything, but I just think that song's really good at sort of making you think, what the fuck's going on here, So.
Yeah, and obviously his Ziggy Stardust character was like quite iconic as well, because it was like something no one had ever seen before, like the gimmick he had and everything. So
yeah, I think that again, I've always been interested in him, and that song was really quite fascinating to listen to. But then quite a few years later, he made a film called The Man Who Fell to Earth, which I don't know if you've ever seen it, but that terrified me. It's a brilliant film. The story is this guy comes down from space. I think he gets trapped on the Earth, on the planet, ends up having to use his technical know-how to create this company through the invention of sort of electronic equipment in order to make enough money to, I think, eventually get back home. I think that's pretty much the gist. But there's a bit where you see the true form of the alien, and he takes his face off, and you see an alien. And the woman who sees it pisses herself, and you actually see a bit of wee coming out. And I remember watching that late one night and thinking, my God, that's exactly what I would do if I saw an alien.
Yeah.
And I still, to this day, I'm waiting to find out if that will happen if I do meet an alien. So,
Well, you never know with what's going on at the minute. It might actually come true.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your next song is Sex Machine by James Brown, and that's almost a bit sorely. What influence did that have on you?
A couple of things. Again, another reason that I found it fascinating was I was listening to the radio. I'm a kid.
Yeah.
And this song comes on. Again, it's not like a love song. You know, it's not just some sort of someone wailing on about, you know, whatever. It was a man. I had no idea who James Brown was. You know, I was like 9 or something. And this song came on, and there's this guy singing about a sex machine. And I'm like, what the? What is this? And in my mind's eye, I was like, what even is a sex machine? And I sort of, you know, is it like a car with a rubber willy on the front? I don't know. But again, it was one of those songs that makes you stop and go, this is not a traditional song, you know.
Yeah.
Really liked it. And then by pure coincidence, you know, that a few years down the line was one of the most heavily sampled songs in hip hop, you know. So the drums are just fantastic in it. You know, that drum break is, I think, is a guy called Clyde Stubblefield, I think was the guy who played that drum break. And just sampled to death years and years later, you know, which is amazing, because I think James Brown was pretty fantastic, you know.
And your next song is obviously one that fits your music genre, The Magic Number by De La Soul. What explanation do you have for that one?
I think by the time, sort of, when did that come out? 1992, something like that. By the time it came out, hip hop was starting to break through and actually be on, you know, top of the pops and get played on the radio and stuff like that. And I was starting to hear things like James Brown. You know, he was being sampled on those songs, and I was like, well, hang on, I recognise that drum beat from that James Brown song. What's going on here? And again, they were songs that were just a bit weirder to what you normally heard. You know, I think the drum sample on Magic Number is a Led Zeppelin drum break, which is, you know, that's pretty interesting. And I just, again, I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was just really, really strange. I went out and bought that record, bought the album, and I don't know if you've ever listened to 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul, but it's a really good album because it isn't just a song, a break, a song, break a song. It's so much weird stuff going on. It's just like a giant comic book with loads of these little interludes and little talky bits and everything, which is kind of the backbone of hip hop. I mean, a lot of hip hop records just end up those little interlude bits are just someone talking about killing someone or something, which could be quite funny for all the wrong reasons. Yeah. But their stuff was insane. The whole thing is like a big quiz show, and these people are being interviewed, and they're doing this quiz as the album's running along, and there's like a million samples in there, and it's brilliant. It's just fantastic. I think Prince Paul was the guy who produced that record, and Prince Paul's just, you know, he's been around for years. Just if you see anything produced by Prince Paul, it's going to be good, you know. So. And
one of their songs that I think is fantastic, Me, Myself and I.
Yeah, really good. Yeah. It's Redding sampling that, I think, as well, with the whistling bit. Is that Me, Myself and I? I think it is, isn't it? Yeah, you know, and really, really good. Really, really good. And they were a bit of a backlash to what was going on in hip hop, you know, and they did something a bit different, and it worked. And, you know, it's cool. We got to do a gig with them about 3 or 4 years ago, and that was really nice, being able to come full circle from being the first record I bought to doing a show with De La Soul. That's cool, you know. So, yeah.
And your next song is obviously, it links to the same genre. I'm Ready by Caveman.
Yes, yeah. Now, Caveman were a British hip hop group. That must have been about 1991. And again, British hip hop, it was really hard for it to get noticed, especially I think at the time, as British hip hop was trying to kick off, the rave scene was kicking off in Britain, and people were getting into dance music, which was, you know, like 3 times as fast. It's good, but again, it put hip hop on the back burner. And I think a lot of people were trying to sort of emulate American accents, and they weren't really getting it right, you know. Nowadays it's completely different, you know. Grime has sort of become the UK hip hop, although there are UK hip hop acts and stuff, you know, it's defined itself now. But I think Caveman were wicked because I saw them on TV, and I was like, that's a Jimi Hendrix sample, that's fantastic. You know, who are these people? And then when you find out they're from Britain, I was like, wow, that's really good, because they did it, and they did it exceptionally well, which I think is a really hard thing to pull off, you know. I think in sort of hip-hop circles, people over a certain age all remember Caveman, and they're much loved in that sort of circle. If you don't know much about them, check them out. And there was a band called Silver Bullet as well, who did a song called 20 Seconds to Comply, Gunshot. There was loads of British bands who were doing it, and Caveman was the first one I heard. I was like, wow, that's pretty damn good. So yeah.
As you're speaking here, obviously, it's a lot of stuff that you've actually discovered, like when you were young and stuff. And I think this generation now finds it hard to discover good music on the TV. Because if I'm to say it, I will. The stuff in the charts these days is naff.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's because obviously you've discovered like a lot of your stuff through like watching Top of the Pops and stuff, and obviously this generation doesn't have that. And
no.
Yeah.
It's weird because I think now, like in those days when I was younger, you had John Peel, who was one of the best DJs on Radio 1, who did his late night show at the weekends. You had like The Enemy, the New Musical Express. You had some stuff on Channel 4 and some stuff on BBC 2. Once a week there'd be like music programmes. And you really had to look for it, so you'd make sure that the mates that you hung out with were into the same sort of stuff, so you could swap tapes and ideas and things like that. And you really had to go looking for stuff, and there were sort of waves of music that you could, if you had a little independent record shop, you'd go in there and try and find what you could that was interesting. But now, because of the internet, you can get everything at once, and that's a hell of a lot of stuff. So where do you begin? And I think a lot of younger people now just tend to, I'm not sort of generalizing, but I think the way it tends to work is if you've grown up with the internet, you just tend to see, because of the algorithm on the internet, you tend to see what the most popular thing is.
Yeah.
For 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you sort of, I'm into that, that's all right. And then it goes, and then someone, oh yeah, okay, that's funny, oh, that's quite a good song. Everything happens so quickly now, there's no time to actually get into something, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but it's definitely different.
I think, as you say, there's probably benefits for both sides, to be honest, because I'll admit it, I'm still a collector of vinyls. I still like buying them, and I think it's good because it's obviously a new wave of technology and you can access songs miles easier, but it's also a shame for these local record shops who don't get the funds in anymore from the sales. So it's got benefits and downsides to it, really.
Yeah, totally. I think it's it's just interesting to see where it'll end up. But I think if you do, the other good thing about the internet is if you do find something you like, you can go and research it and find out loads about it straight away, which I think in some ways can kill the mystery about something a little bit. You know? But in other ways, it can take you on a pathway to loads and loads of fantastic stuff. I'm still using the internet to find out about records that I heard 20 years ago, 25 years ago. You know what I mean? And that's great. That's fantastic. Just avoid all the crap stuff.
Yeah. Your next, I'll move on to your final song now. It is Super Furry Animals, one of your fellow Welsh bands, with Slow Life. What does that song bring to you?
Slow Life is well, everything they've done I think is really good. I don't think they've got any bad tracks. I might be a bit biased because I'm Welsh and I've done gigs with them and know them a bit, but Slow Life is a particularly good one because when that came out was around about the time that we were sort of super busy doing gigs, touring, just going all over the place and doing shows with them, and it was just a song that got played a lot on the tour bus at full volume. There's a couple of remixes of it on they did I think it was like a B-sides and rarities album with remixes and stuff like that on a few years ago, and there's remixes on there that are really good. And again, it's another example of a band that you can't really pigeonhole them. That's quite a great track to play to a load of people in a big club. At the same time, Super Free Animals will make a song that's just a really nice, piece of melodic beautifulness. So it's great, good track. Turn it up loud, put it on some headphones, have a good time all the time. It's brilliant.
I have to admit, I've never really heard that before because I like a lot of them 90s bands, but like that style of music, but I've never really discovered them. I've always knew of them, but they've always like took a back seat,
Yeah,
like because of the decade they were in. So
it's worth, especially if you've got Spotify or whatever now.
Yeah.
Because you can access all that stuff so easily. But I think the good thing about Super Furry Animals is, and again, it's something people don't do these days, is to be able to sit down and listen to their albums from beginning to end.
Yeah.
You know, that's where you really get you get your money's worth. Then, you know, they're a really good albums band, really really good. You know, I think it's only because were they signed to the same label as Oasis, or at least when Oasis released that first album, it was the same week that Super Furry Animals. I can't even say Animals had an album coming out, and sadly that Oasis thing overshadowed it a bit. I think they deserve even more recognition than they get, and they're not a mystery band by any you know, loads of people know about them, but I think everyone in the world should listen to at least one Super Furry Animals album before they die.
I'll definitely take up on that after you've said that. So, and thank you for sending in those songs.
No problem. Yeah, Phantom Power. That's the album that's worth listening to. Check that out. Put it on your headphones. I listen to them all, but Phantom Power's a great one. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, so I'll certainly check that out. Back to Goldie Lookin Chain now. Obviously, a lot of your songs contain lyrics that satirise hip-hop and the culture in Newport. Could you explain a little bit more what you aimed for when you were writing these songs?
Well, they're funny, you know, and they're supposed to bring a bit of a smile to your face, but a lot of the stuff in them is it's a heightened version of reality, but most of the stuff you're hearing in those records are things that we experienced growing up. You know, there are references to people and places that someone listening in, you know, Liverpool or Scotland or wherever isn't going to get those references, but they get the general humour. You know?
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because we didn't think it would translate further than like literally the end of the street. We did not think anybody would be into it, but we've done so many gigs now where people have said, that song's good, I like that song, I really like what you do, it was the same for me when I was a kid, or we've got a place in our town that's like that, you know. So just through our experience, it works out, it's a shared experience, you know, that idea of going out and seeing the local characters and, you know, going to the local spots and doing all the stuff you do. It's life without realising it. It's a sort of mirroring life in a really weird, surreal, almost Monty Python sort of way, you know.
Being in a band to me always seems like you must have a good time on the road, having a laugh on the tour bus. Do you have a most memorable moment while you've been touring? Or like most funny, something like that?
Oh God, I mean, it's relentless.
There must have been loads.
Yeah, I mean, it's when we were touring like really hard, and you know, when we got signed to that record label, it was really weird knowing that what was going on in the outside world, because you just end up in a bubble.
Yeah.
And you know, you are going to sleep at like 3 o'clock in the morning every day, getting up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, eating some food, having a shower, doing a sound check. You feel like shit all day, and then as soon as you do the gig, you're just wide awake again, and then you just get on a bus and start travelling overnight to the next venue and get drunk, you know. So it was really funny, but it's so incredibly tiring. Like, I think if we don't do those big tours now, and I'm so glad, because it would kill me. It would kill me. Just relentless, just non-stop. But yeah, loads of funny stuff happened. Besides being tired all the time, loads of funny stuff happened. Probably can't talk about a lot of it on here.
Yeah.
But just stupid stuff. I remember we were in Exeter once, playing the university there, and someone found a whole bouncy castle, an inflatable castle in this room. So they just plugged it in, turned it on. We just filled this room up with a bouncy castle, which is a really stupid thing to do, because once you've inflated it, you can't deflate it.
Yeah.
So that was quite good.
When was that? Was it 90s or?
That was when we started, 2003, 2002. I think that's when we were touring, 2003, 2004, something like that.
Because I know you said you got together in the 90s. I wondered if it was like before you became...
We'd all been mates from the early 90s onwards, some of us even longer, like Mystical and Billy Webb. I was in primary school with them, so I've known them for like years. But we probably started recording around about 98, something like that. I'm at a guess, trying to sort of remember back. 98, 99, 2000, somewhere along those lines. 2000 was when we probably put something out, in the sense of recorded it onto a tape and then left it in a mate's car, So yeah, it's just been there since day one, really. And we're just lucky enough to have a situation where we can take all the stupid stuff out into a crowd full of people, and they seem to enjoy it. So quite good,
And we'll come back onto that later when we talk about what you're excited for when you get back on the road. But I'm going to change the subject onto podcasts now, because you have two of your own. The Unexplained with Mike Bubbins, and that can be found on the BBC Sounds app. And you've also got a brand new one, David Plimpton, is it?
Yes, To Meet the Street with David Plimpton, yes.
Could you explain a little bit about what you do on The Unexplainers and this new one that you've got?
Yeah, sure. The Unexplainers was a radio series for 5 years. So there's 5 series, and luckily we got commissioned by the BBC to make that, which was wicked. BBC Radio Wales, and the idea is it is a almost real paranormal investigation program. I don't know if you've had the chance to hear it yet, but the idea is I play myself, a guy who likes hip hop, who is obsessed with the paranormal. And Mike Bubbins, who's a stand-up comedian, plays himself, who is a man who is an ex-PE teacher turned stand-up comic who doesn't believe in the paranormal. For the sake of the show, we, as we do with Goldie Lookin Chain, just heighten everything and make it more stupid than it actually is.
Yeah.
And we got to travel the country investigating real paranormal events, so we looked at UFO sightings across the country, poltergeist cases, sightings of strange animals, all these bizarre things that have happened, and we interviewed the people that witnessed these things. We then spoke to scientists, psychologists, physics experts, people who could debunk these things that we'd seen. And it was really good fun doing it, because it wasn't done in that sort of cheesy satellite TV late night paranormal. It was. We just thought, let's have some fun with this, and it's quite easy with those sorts of programs to take the piss out of the people who claim to have seen these things, because you can't. They've all definitely seen something.
Yeah.
These people have witnessed these things, but I don't know what it is. And we didn't want to do this thing where we just sort of wound them up and said, "Oh, you're stupid." We wanted ourselves to make it look like we were the idiots. And so we did that, and we spoke to some really, really genuinely interested people. And yeah, it's all on the BBC Sounds app now, so you can hear all the 5 series. I think the last ones we did were about poltergeists, artificial intelligence taking over the world, all sorts of ridiculous things that have affected people in some way that you probably never will be able to explain, so hence the Unexplainers.
And I think if you were into that type of stuff as well, it must have been brilliant for you going around the country experiencing people's different stories about what they'd experienced and stuff, because it must have been amazing hearing some of the stories. Whether you thought it was rubbish or whether it was true, it must have been interesting hearing what people had to say. Yeah, definitely. We did one about one episode about the search for the Holy Grail, which was really interesting, because there's a thing called the Nantios Cup in Wales, which is an artifact dating back hundreds and hundreds of years that was believed to cure people of illness, and it exists in I think it's the National Museum of Wales now.
there's hardly any of it left, because what people used to do, they used to trek for miles and miles around to come and see this thing, and if they were ill, they would eat some of the cup, and thinking it would give them, healing capabilities. And we spoke to someone who, and I'm not allowed to say too much more over it because we didn't put it in the actual final edit, but we spoke to someone who told us that where the cup was found, there was something that potentially says that might not be the real one, and he might know where the real one is. And I'd like to say more, but I can't say any more. But that's what's really interesting. I mean, historically speaking, there's a lot of really fun, fascinating stuff there. People have seen UFOs and stuff, and they're not nutbags. These people, they've seen things that are genuinely, really, really strange. And who knows what they are? But yeah, it's all done with a really stupid sense of humour and some really ridiculous things that we end up getting up to, so quite good fun.
I'll leave the link to that one in the description, and also your brand new one, Meet the Street with David Plimpton. What's that about? What do you do on that one?
Yes. Well, lockdown has been pretty ridiculous. We haven't been able to get out anywhere.
Yeah.
So I sort of stuck here. I haven't been able to do any because I do bit of freelance production work on radio programs and comedy stuff and things like that, and obviously there was no work going on, there was no gigs, so I thought, well, I'm stuck at home all the time, everybody's stuck at home, we're all just staring out of our bedroom windows all the time, and it gave me the idea for this character called David Plimpton, who in my mind is my next door neighbour. Obviously he's not, because he doesn't exist. But he's an old guy, he's retired, and he loves his street, he loves keeping an eye on everybody, and he loves the idea of sharing what goes on in and around his neighbourhood with the world through a podcast, which is the first time he's ever tried doing it. And so he's decided to interview all of his neighbours. And I got some fantastic people in to play the roles of the neighbours. I got Mike Bubbins from The Unexplainers, of course. A guy called Richard Sandling, who's a comedian, does a really brilliant thing called Perfect Movie, which you can see online. Recreates scenes from famous films with no budget. Very good. Who else did I get? Alex Lowe, who is a really funny guy. He does a character called Clinton Baptiste. That's his own thing. He was in Phoenix Nights. He featured in that. He plays, for the sake of Meet the Street, a children's author who I interviewed, who writes some really weird books. Who else is in it? God, I can't remember. My mind's completely wiped. There's one coming up. Let me just double check this now. There is one coming up very soon. Because the first episode went up the other day, and I'm just going to check if you can edit this bit out, obviously, because this is the bit where I'm just dicking around. Let's have a look here. What is this? Mark? Yeah, where is it now? I'm just trying to find the episode here. I can't find it. But there's a guy called Mark Davison who's a very funny comedian. I've done some stuff with him in the past, and he does a football online football comedy thing called Exploding Heads. That's really worth watching. And he also does a football podcast called God, my mind's falling apart. It's completely falling apart. But check out Exploding Heads online. You'll find it. He's in the next episode that's coming up, and that is about a man who holds the world record for having Britain's longest middle finger, and that is a lot of fun. So yeah, I thought I'd try and create something that is a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on at the moment, with us all being locked indoors, and the idea of us, whether we like it or not, having to chat with our neighbours more than we normally do. Because there's not much else going on at the moment, So yeah, it's out on iTunes now, and there's a Twitter account at Plimpton David, spelled Plympton. There's a Facebook page, and it's just something hopefully that will give people a bit of a laugh and take their mind off of all the shit that's going on at the moment. So yeah, check it out, have a go.
Finally, John, I'd like to thank you for doing this again, and I'll wrap it up by saying Goldie Lookin Chain are touring November 2021, playing England dates such as Leeds, Birmingham and Preston, and Welsh dates such as Cardiff and Swansea. What are you looking forward to the most about getting back on the roads and just getting back into things?
Oh God, what am I looking forward to? Hearing some music louder than the kitchen radio, you know, because I haven't heard any loud music for ages. Even if I have to put up with listening to my own music, I will risk that to hear it loud. I'd rather hear someone else's music loud. But yeah, being in a big room full of people, all a bit drunk, and all just having a good time. That's what I'm missing, you know. So, yeah.
Which people haven't had for a long time, but
yes.
I'd like to thank you for doing this, John. I will put your links to your podcasts in the description, and I'll also put link to Goldie Lookin Chain tickets on Ticketmaster. But
brilliant.
Thank you once again, and I appreciate this. A big thank you to John for doing this. I hope you all enjoy, and don't forget to comment, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.